Friday, and I would assume that on Saturday there would be even less on
Even lesser.
So won't you think it would be more beneficial for your proposal to add Saturday and well, augment the numbers by maybe 50% sometime?
Sure, I mean, when you consider the overnight factor and even the Saturday, Sunday costs, it's going to shoot up at least 3 to 4 times. But for us, we feel that this itself should serve as sufficient motivation. And in fact, we have prepared this one, which can explain the costs involved for this implementation.
Maybe let me add to that. During my presentation as well, I mentioned it was about 9 hours per day per tutorial, right? But in my figure of the calculation for the week, I actually mentioned it was about 70 hours. This actually also taking into consideration Saturdays and Sundays, if let's say the user has not switched the air conditioning off on Friday after 11 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying 70 hours of usage?
70 hours of wastage.
Of waste.
Yeah,
So 70 hours when it's being used but nobody's there.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, the cost, with regard to the cost, you were saying 6,000 a month
Yes.
is, clarify that?
So that 6,000 a month is what I tried to explain on the sheets. So what it takes is, it takes a very conservative estimate. You don't take 70 hours, you take 20 hours a week, and you see how much it's going to cost by using a simple approximation of this air conditioning right here. So we managed to get the rating on the air conditioning, how much it costs in electricity terms to run it for 1 hour, how much that translates into money from the Singapore Electricity Board, and the last one, how much when it scaled up to the scale of 100 rooms, which is the number of tutorial rooms we managed to find at Science and Engineering.
So how much is it in this room for 1 hour? I mean, I don't have the figures in front of me. How much does
Sure, it's the wastage in this room in 1 week, you can save $15
Okay, so the wastage is $15 per week.
per week, yes.
In one room.
Yes.
So actually, per hour, the amount of
It's
the
much
cost.
lower. It's by 20, yeah. It's because the billing of the electricity, when you convert it in monetary terms, it looks much lower.
I have a question. I believe there's some current system in place which is to lock up tutorial rooms after a certain time, which is about like 10 p.m. But isn't that already in place? As in, when the person locks up the room, don't they check that the aircons are off at night?
Okay, let me clarify on that. When locking up the tutorial rooms, right, for example, let's look at this room itself and maybe rooms in engineering, right? The rooms are actually managed by an automatic locking system, which means that the door will actually be locked by a magnetic system after, say, 11 p.m. Yeah. So what the security guard actually does is he goes around the rooms to check that the doors are actually locked and not obstructed by any foreign objects. So that is the task of the security guard. So what he does is just to look around and not actually go inside the room itself to switch off the air conditioning and lights. Yes.
So why not leverage on that security guard who goes around physically to check that all the rooms are actually locked, and must also check that the aircon's actually off?
Okay. With regards to that, the automatic system actually saves the human error or human neglections that are actually involved in this system using the security guards. Because let's say the security guard does a tour around the classrooms at about 2-hour intervals, or 3-hour intervals, or maybe 4 hours. I'm not very sure about the exact time. But after he switches off the, say, electricity at about maybe 11 p.m., but during exam periods, the classroom is actually open about 24 hours. So after he actually switches off the electricity, another student can actually go in and then switch on the lights and air conditioning again. Yeah. So for this issue, right, after the student say leave the room after about 30 minutes or to an hour, the electricity will be left running again for 3.5 hours without anybody inside the room. Yeah. So the automatic system actually allows us to better operate and better utilize the electricity within classrooms.
So now is the aircon turned off at night?
No, that will depend on the user, the last user leaving the room. So if let's say one of us leave this room and not actually switch off the air conditioning, it will be left running throughout the entire day without
conditioning, which is for the bigger rooms. That's what we understood. At the tutorial room level, you only have it controlled here. Whereas for a lecture theatre or say the MTSH, those central air conditioning units are normally stopped after 11 p.m. And by stop, they do not actually turn off the cooling unit, they just block the flow of air to the room.
But this one is the flow air comes from a central unit.
For this room, no. It's right over here. The compressor is in the back. The control unit is at the wall.
So will they turn off this compressor at
The
night?
only way to turn it off is coming here and switching it off and cutting the mains to the whole block. So we did ask them a very specific question at the Office of Estate and Development. We said that there is a room with a local unit like this, and do you have any regulations on when to switch it off? And their reply was that no, we do not have, it's expected of the last user, or it's encouraged for the last user to do so. So currently there is no system in place, and it's not part of the, like Vivian had mentioned, it's not part of the protocol of the security officers to check whether the room is running or not.
But if the central air con is turned off, then all this won't bring any energy.
Yes, the central air conditioning does not reach every room. The central air conditioning only reaches the lecture theatres and the labs, and a few of them. So for example, switching off the central air conditioning would not affect this room for the whole night.
What is the time period for installing a sensor?
It's pretty much the same as maybe you would expect installing a fire alarm in the room or a camera in the room. It's about a few hours, 2 to 3 hours, depending on how many people are involved. Maybe 2 technicians could set up the room in 2 hours.
So how do you go about with your installation of with the sensors in all the tutorials in the Faculty of Engineering and Science? How would you go about?
Yes, so the ideal thing is not to disrupt classes. I guess that was the main concern, where you don't want to stop a class happening and go in and modify things. So there are significant times, like 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every week or every day could be enough to set up the room. When suppose there is no class 6 to 7, or maybe there is no class in the morning 7 to 8. You could just do it in a rolling manner, block by block, and it could get the job done in a few weeks.
Just now with Ashwin, we actually have the multi-schedule of the rooms, so we can actually manage by looking at the different slots and then allow the technicians to wait during the empty slots.
How many motion sensors do you need for one tutorial room like this one?
Ideally, for something like this, it would be enough to have one.
And how about a lecture theatre?
A lecture theatre is very difficult to monitor, and that would require at least, depending on the size of the lecture theatre, if you take one which is for 150 students, you need at least 6 or 5.
What's the detecting range of the sensors you provide?
The detecting range, like how far do they work?
Yes.
The normal ones, they work up to 10 meters, and that's why I considered this room to be sufficient for one.
But is it working when there's no light?
So these sensors, actually when you flip the other side of your financial cost, you can see the sensors. They have their own infrared lasers or a small LED which shoots out and gets its return value, and that's how they decide. I guess it's the same as you see the automated taps, you put your hand in and you get water out. Those do not depend on whether there's a light in the room or not. It's similar to that way they have a beam by themselves which is obstructed or not.
You say the range of the sensor is 10 meters. So in this tutorial room, where would you install the sensor?
Actually, it depends on which kind of sensor we're installing, because there are many different types. For some, there will be like 100 degrees of coverage. For some, it's 360 degrees coverage. So for a room like this, if you go at 10 meters, 360 degrees, one will be in the center of the room, which cover almost the entire time.
The sensor works like, does the laser pass through